Day four. All right, we're off and running. So this is a topic that's very complex. I'm actually going to direct you to the full text-based article for a lot of this because I could spend hours on video talking about it. I'm going to give you a really brief overview here on the video, but like I said, double check the article and make sure to go through there because there's a lot that's involved in this. So we're talking about hiring new employees, and we're talking about trying to figure out whether or not those employees are not only just going to be able to perform the job, but if they're going to be able to do it safely and also do it with a way that's promoting your culture as a company or an organization, and making sure that they're not going to end up doing something that's going to undermine that culture or paint a very bad picture of your organization. So the reason why you're looking to hire people is you want them to do work, and they come with backgrounds that in a lot of cases have some great assets and great experience that you want to include within your organization. The scary thing is that they also have a ton of life experience that might not be what you're looking for, or might be an indicator of behavior or job performance that isn't going to be what you're looking for. And so it's nerve-wracking. I mean, if you ask anyone who does a lot of hiring, they're always concerned about whether or not they're getting a fair assessment of the person that's sitting in front of them or the resume that they're reading before they make that take that leap to hire them and bring them on board and make them a part of the organization. So in the hiring process, the three things that we're going to talk about, and again, this is a very vast topic, the three things we're going to talk about are criminal background checks, we're going to talk about pre-employment drug testing, and we're going to talk about pre-employment physicals. And each one of these have some really major pitfalls that you have to avoid, but also some best practices that can really help you out. And it's not a 100% solution, because you're never going to be able to hit on every single one of those people that you hire, and you're never going to be able to do enough digging to make sure that they're the kind of perfect candidate that you're looking for. But it's going to help you be a little bit better in terms of your hit rate in finding people that are going to be able to perform the job well, safely, and like I said, not necessarily conflict with the culture that you're looking to perpetuate within your organization. So pre-employment background checks. The first pointer that I'm going to make, and this applies to all of these tools, is include an attorney in the conversation when you're talking about your hiring practices, your disciplinary practices, anything that has to happen on the HR front. An attorney is going to be able to give you a lot of insight into what you can and can't do. And there are a ton of pitfalls in this arena that if you're not careful, you're trying to bring someone on board who's the right fit, but if you're also doing it in a way that excludes others or creates a precedent, you could actually end up not just avoiding a bad hire, but stumbling into an employment practices liability claim or a discrimination claim that could end up costing you a ton of money. So always pay particular attention to that. So with pre-employment background checks and criminal history checks, what you're looking for is behavior, right? You're looking for potentially unlawful behavior that happened in their past, or behavior that if done again is going to cause you a major issue, right? So it's good because you can see people's background and whether or not they kind of fit the bill of what you're looking to hire. You also have to take it relative, though. So past performance and behavior is not always indicative of future behavior and performance. So always keep that in mind. Also apply context when you're looking at using background checks, because the circumstances under which certain things happen are important. And so I've hired people in the past that had what would normally look like a very bad black mark against them, and they ended up being fantastic people. And it was because I had to take the time to understand the context under which those things in their background occurred or happened to them, or they had to make the decision that they made. And if you're just kind of doing a cursory look over their background, you would just automatically throw them out as a potential candidate. But if you understand the context, you might be able to get past that and really be able to capitalize on the assets that they're going to bring to the table. Pitfalls on this one are really a lot of states have passed a ton of legislation and regulations with respect to how you can use criminal history or background checks, what you can actually use to make a hiring or firing decision, or passing over a candidate. And if you run aground of that, like I said, you can end up in a lot of hot water. So always make sure that you're including your attorney in the conversation about what to look for and what you can and can't use as far as information. Best practices: be consistent. Don't just do a background check on someone who comes in because they look like they're worrying you just because of their aesthetics. Be consistent about it. You can't have a background check for one person and then let someone else just completely skate and not do the background check, because that's going to set an awful precedent. And if that ever did see the light of a courtroom, it's going to look very poorly on your organization. Also within this tool, make sure that you're using a reliable third party to do it. Don't go off of conjecture or anything like that. And make sure, like I said, to apply context to these situations. So, something that's innocent could end up actually being a very bad situation that you want to avoid, or something that looks like it's a bad situation might actually end up being, could be a character trait of someone that you're actually looking to hire and want to hire that person based off of the context of what might have occurred in that or come up in that background check. Pre-employment drug testing. Again, very regulated. Include your attorney in this one. So there's a couple of situations where it's actually mandated. So in a lot of states, CDL drivers, commercial driver's license holders have to have regular drug testing, and they're required to divulge certain drugs that they may be on if they're prescription pharmaceuticals, and then also if they have arrests or certain situations where they were caught with illegal narcotics or things like that on them. They could end up losing their license, in which case if you just ignore that or don't do a drug test, put them behind the wheel, and they have a really bad accident or really bad claim occurs, you could actually magnify the amount of damages that you have to end up paying, because they'll say that you negligently hired that person or didn't do your due diligence to make sure that they were going to be able to operate a vehicle responsibly or do their job responsibly. Drug testing, again, you have to apply context. There are certain things that you might be able to look past, and there are other things that might be immediately disqualifiable offenses. So some of the pitfalls here, with the really big one that comes to mind is the legalization movement or decriminalization of marijuana and other drugs within our society. Various states have different ideas of what they want to allow people to do and use. And so you always have to keep that in context. So, the state that you're hiring in or that you're based out of is always going to have certain regulations that apply to this. The other thing to remember with this is, it's going to be, you don't want to be discriminatory. So again, you going to want to be consistent with this. It can't just be, one person you mandate that they have a drug test and then you let 4 other people in without doing it. The drug testing has to be consistent, and drug testing also is important, not just in the pre-employment phase, but after someone becomes an employee. You can also include random but regular drug testing as well to make sure that those employees aren't, they didn't pass the pre-employment test, but then once they get on the job, they're using narcotics or opioids or things like that that might cause them to be unsafe or have problems down the line. All right, so the third and last tool that we're going to talk about is PreEmployment Physicals. So PreEmployment Physicals, again, I've said it twice, I'm going to keep saying it, include your attorney in your policies and procedures with respect to this. But PreEmployment Physicals are important, not just from the standpoint of understanding whether or not someone can withstand the rigors of doing a physical job, or making sure that they're not going to have a problem doing the job safely and they might end up hurting themselves. But it's also going to give you a couple of really important tools down the line if you happen to have, say, a workers' comp claim that's associated with this person. It's going to give you a baseline. You're going to understand what their health is, at the time of hire, so that in the future, if they have a claim that says I'm disabled or I'm hurt, and you can always refer back to that pre-employment physical to make sure that you're understanding whether or not the the condition always was there, or whether or not it really did arise as a result of them doing their work, or made it worse as a result of doing their work. Okay, something also to keep in mind here is the idea of HIPAA. So you can't take this information and spread it around, but you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping personal information, personal health information secured. Okay, so this has cyber liability implications all over it, and you can run aground of regulations where you can get fined and things like that if you don't protect this information or use it correctly or in a limited way and not use it too broadly. Also, with using pre-employment physicals, you want to have a third-party physician who's going to be doing the physicals and evaluating the individuals, and you're going to want to provide them with job duty descriptions, because just a general physical might not necessarily unearth issues resulting, that might result as someone who's being used in a very physical job, or they might have a physical ailment or limitation in one area, but it might not affect their job performance in another, and that needs to be taken into consideration, because you might end up disqualifying really credible candidates because of a physical issue, but that physical issue might not actually impact what you're worried about it impacting within their job performance. Something else to keep in mind is ADA compliance, Americans with Disability Act compliance. Make sure that you're not discriminating against people that have disabilities just because they have disabilities. There has to be a genuine reason why you might pass on a candidate if they have a disability. It's valid to pass on them if that disability makes it so that they can't do a specific job duty safely. But like I said, when you're providing those job duties to the physician, the part of that assessment needs to be whether or not that disability actually impacts one of those areas. And so if the disability doesn't, you can't use that as a disqualifiable piece of that hiring or non-hiring process. You need to be able to identify, specifically whether or not that disability actually does apply to certain job duties and whether or not that presents a problem or whether or not it's a non-issue. Something to note with job pre-employment physicals is that you can also find out whether or not someone has a pre-existing condition and it could have resulted from a workers' comp injury at a prior employer. And why this is important is because if that individual ends up becoming hired and being part of your organization, and they now get injured in the same way that they were injured prior, or they say that they have a workers' comp injury that's been, or they have an injury that was exacerbated by their work with you, you could actually dramatically limit what you're responsible for paying for, and it can actually translate back to the prior employer. But if you don't know that, and if the insurance company doesn't know that, they're not necessarily going to push back on it. They're just going to take care of it as if it was just the result of that employee working for you and doing their job for you. So always keep that in mind, that in people's prior history, they could have come from a former employer that had a covered claim, or maybe even they had a claim that they tried to get the former employer to pay for. It was denied, and so they found you as a new employer, and maybe they'll try and get it covered again through your insurance. And if the insurance carrier is different, maybe they might be able to get it covered this time without having to pay for it themselves. All right, day 4 is in the books. Thank you very much for viewing. Please, like I always say, subscribe, like, comment, ask us questions, and we're going to be putting out more. So I'll see you on day 5.